Alan, we're sitting here tonight with some of my favorite people. We got Reno back in the control room.
Mm-hmm.
I got Barbara over here to my right. I got
I've got Gene over here.
over to your left. And sitting in front of us, we got Mr. Jay Williams back with us again.
Yeah.
So
And
cool.
happy to be here. Thank you.
So you claim Galveston County is home.
I do.
Born and raised there, or?
No, I was actually born in Houston, but I went to high school in League City in Galveston County, and that's mostly where I have spent my life, my adult life. So it
Close
is
to the ocean.
Yes, it
Lucky,
is.
lucky.
It's a kind of a suburb of Houston at this point, but it still has its own flavor.
Well, we like to feel that way about Waxahachie the same way. So
Right.
it's close enough to Dallas, but far enough away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Raised in Houston, did you play in band, or how did you get started musically?
I did not. I actually, my mom gave me piano lessons when I was a very young child, but it didn't take very well. I remembered very little of it.
Me too. I know that
Yeah.
same feeling. Mm-hmm.
But then she bought my brother a guitar, and he didn't take to that, and she showed me some chords when I was about 12 or 13 years old, and I started trying to figure out how to play, and basically it all went from there. It was the introduction to the guitar, but it was almost always acoustic guitars. I did for a very short period of time have an electric guitar, but it was short.
Sounds like me. I like to mess with electric guitars, but I'm just not gutsy enough to play one on stage yet. you
Yeah.
know?
So
Yeah.
when did you figure out that you could write your own songs and you wanted to write your own song?
Fairly early. I was in my late teens that I wrote my first song. I don't remember it anymore. I don't remember anything about it anymore. I just remember writing it. And then through my young adulthood, I at various times got serious trying to see if I could make a career out of music, and trying to blend the aspect of cover stuff versus
You hit it right. That was a Williams slip.
Yes.
We're not going to blame it on Floyd. Floyd. I
Freud,
can't even
honey,
talk.
Freud.
Go ahead.
But I continued to try to work at various jobs and didn't do a very good job of it. But at about 20-something years ago, I played a little more seriously as an acoustic musician. And although I started out trying to play mostly my own stuff, I ended up doing more covers, and I kind of lost my way and realized that really wasn't what I wanted to do. More recently, I have been more dedicated to and making sure that I am playing the original stuff, and I still slip in some cover stuff. I love all kinds of music, so it's something that I love being able to arrange it and make it sound different in the way.
Well, let's talk about that for just a second. Who are some of the artists that you like to cover a lot, or that speak to you?
Well, it's funny because when I grew up, my parents were music lovers. They weren't musicians, but they were music lovers, and they both sang in choirs. They listened to swing. They were teenagers in the 30s and 40s, and so that was their music, and they just kept it all the time. And so I listened to swing almost exclusively for the first 12 years of my life, and then the Beatles appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show, and I didn't see it, but the next day at school, the world had changed, and so everything turned to rock and roll from that point, the 60s rock and roll, so my whole focus changed. But that early childhood of having access to and constantly listening to swing and kind of pop jazz was still embedded in there. There was one point in my 20s when I decided I wanted to try to play some lead guitar, electric guitar. I went and took some lessons from a guy, and he started teaching me jazz instead of rock and roll. He was teaching me jazz chording and jazz progressions and key changes, but it fed right back to all that stuff that I remembered as a kid.
Yeah.
And so it affected my writing, it affected the choices of songs that I did. So to answer your question, this is a very long answer, but to answer your question, most of what I do is swing era and old jazz standards rather than pop or rock
Such
and roll.
as?
I do Scotch and Soda.
Okay, I can hear that. Yeah.
Yeah. And
But see, you've got a folk. That's what I was going to mention. How do you kind of rectify that folk nature of what you do and blend it with the swing stuff? I can see that as being incorporated in what you do.
Yeah, I think the answer is that almost no matter what musical structure it may have, if you're playing it on an acoustic guitar as a solo, it's going to sound folk to the average listener. Now, a musician who has some training will watch and say, that's not folk, that's structured more like jazz or swing. Even the songs that I write, I have key changes and I have progressions that are different than most folk musicians, but it still sounds like folk. And the other aspect, I remember this from a music teacher I had in college, said, why is it that the emphasis in folk music is not so much on the structure and all of the intricacies of music? And the answer was because it's about the lyrics.
Yes, it is
it's
lyrical.
about the stories.
That's right. Yeah.
And that is the focus of it. And so even though my songs may be structured musically differently, I'm still thinking about the stories and I'm still attached to the verbiage as much as I am the music.
I'm wondering who in the folk field really tweaked you.
I think that I would say chronologically, the influences would start with Henry Mancini. Then secondly was Paul McCartney. And then Tom Waits. More recently, Hayes Carll. That may initially sound like a very divergent group, but from my listening ear, they all have pretty songs. Tom Waits, has that very distinctive gravelly voice, but he's still got some beautiful melodies and beautiful that other people do later in other ways.
Well, Leonard Cohen too is a good
Leonard
example
Cohen
of
is
that,
the same way, where I hear the melody and the harmonies that they're putting in there as much as the words, and that's what attracts me. I'm a sucker for a pretty song. That's basically what it amounts to, is that if it's a pretty song, the Bee Gees. I know a lot of people don't like it, but they made some beautiful songs.
Oh, yeah.
I still think Massachusetts is one of the, just from that whole period.
Yeah.
And To Love Somebody, right where it started with them. Still a great song. Helen and I were sitting around singing that song the other night. So kind of a cool song. And it sticks in your head,
Yeah.
That's what you want a song to do.
Jimmy Webb was another one that I listened to. He had a bunch of hits in the 60s, but I guess the idea is that if somebody was writing pretty melodies, that was kind of the hook for me. That's what really...
I still remember that. I am a lineman for the county. That just got it all kicked off,
It did.
Got it all kicked off for him.
You mentioned that you had a brother. Does he play any instrument, or is he musical at all now? Or
he loves music, but he's not a musician, doesn't play, but we're very close, and we do other things together.
Good.
What about kids? Do you have kids?
I do. I have a daughter and her husband and 2 grandkids, and then my wife has a son and 4 grandkids. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Any musical people there?
Not as of yet, but
you're working on it.
We're
right?
working on it.
So one of the things, Helen, that I noticed too about his songs that he did in the set tonight was that there was a lot of songs that were of the Audubon variety. I know this gentleman likes birds.
Yep.
So tell us about what your affinity is there, because
mostly
two of these songs.
Mostly I think that came from my wife, who's a nature lover and has gotten me involved in paying attention to birds and paying attention to nature. There's another song that I didn't do that is about the animal life in Galveston County, or in Galveston Bay, I guess I should say. Although that one is a pretty old song. When you're young and you're 19, almost all songs are going to be about girls and heartbreak and all that kind of stuff. And then when you get a little older, you're kind of looking more outside of yourself, and you're paying attention to the world around you a little bit more. And sometimes that doesn't resonate with somebody who's 20 years old or 19 years old, but it resonates with people who are a little older and are kind of tired of the ups and downs of teenage romance and so forth. I'm constantly looking for themes. There's a couple of other songs that are historical songs that I do. That they're a little harder to do, and they're long and drawn out, but there's some historical ones there as well.
Where do you like to play when you're out gigging? Tell us some of the places.
Well, I'm just getting started, to tell you the truth. I've been playing around over at the Mucky Duck on their open mics, and I've been playing at Anderson Fair some. Obviously played up here last year, and a couple of house concerts in the Austin area. But this is kind of the beginning of it. I mentioned that I had played somewhat professionally 20 some odd years ago, and then I started working at my wife's company, the one that she owns, a landscape company, 22 years ago, and kind of decided I better make a go of this, and we did. But in the last few years, I've had more time, and so now I'm kind of back into trying to revive all of this.
So ultimately, what are your goals with your music and your songs?
I love being able to have people that are listening. And it's kind of interesting that the house concert phenomenon has blossomed up over the last
It sure has.
10 or 20 years, and come from almost nothing, and now here you have listening rooms all across the nation in people's homes and in other situations. I went to a Bruce Springsteen concert a couple or 3 years ago, and Bruce Springsteen has some beautiful songs. I mean, I know he's got some really rocky songs, but he's got some beautiful songs as well. And he was playing a couple of ballads, some arena type thing. The 1,000 people that were right there standing in front of the stage, there were a bunch of them that were pretty rowdy. And he started playing this gorgeous song that was very meaningful, and yet it was very rowdy all around in front of him. And they really weren't listening to him. And I thought, geez, if Bruce Springsteen can't get people to listen to him, then there's nobody that can get it, So the idea of smaller venues where people are going to listen rather than party has really become very attractive. And actually that, I guess, going back to when I was much younger, that was one of the things that turned me off about music, was that it was mostly about going to a bar and getting drunk.
Yeah.
And the music was just kind of in the background. And now that seems to have changed dramatically.
It has.
With venues just like this, where people are there to listen to the acoustic side of it, but also the lyrical side of it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Well, I'd like to feel like that we're on that vanguard too, just knowing where we want to be now, and kind of trying to fine tune it. As you can see, even since you've been here, we've made a few changes. So.
You have, yes.
I tell you, it's so good to have you here.
Well, thank you. You guys are great hosts, and I certainly appreciate what you have done for me, but what you do for musicians and music. It's just great. It's just great.
Our whole thing is the singer-songwriter. Boy, you fit right in there.
Yeah.
You do.
We appreciate you a whole lot. I want to thank Gene and Barbara for coming tonight, too.
Absolutely. They take the best pictures. Just you wait and see. And thank you, Reno, for the engineering.
Yeah.
And thank you to you, Randy. Without you, this wouldn't be possible. We also want to thank you, the listener out there. Keep tuning in. You're in the music room.
With Jay Williams.